going to take a look at how to use our cameras. But before we get started on that, I want to point out this is what the charger looks like. You can go ahead and take that battery out, and then we have an SD card here as well. So if you flip your camera over, you can open up the bottom, and there is a spot for your battery. It just kind of clips in there, and then to release it, you would just pull back on that little gray lever there. So then your SD card, if you take the kind of shiny gold side, if you're holding the camera like this with the lens facing you, you'll just push the card down. Or let's look at it from this direction. If you're holding the camera this way with the screen and the buttons facing you, you can see how to remove the SD card too. You just push down, it pops up, you can pull that out. But if you're holding it this way, you'll take the side with the label and then just push that down, and then you can close that little door. This is for you to mount a tripod too. Now we can turn our camera on, and then you'll see immediately when I flip it, I've got a screen here. So this has a lot of important information. We're going to be looking at how to use our camera in manual mode. So you'll want to make sure it says M, which you can see the top dial here. There's some other settings too, and AV and TV can be helpful in some instances. But other than that, we try to work in M so we can learn our camera settings. So we'll talk about this in just a moment. Other thing I want to mention is you do have a lens cap cover on there. So this protects the lens and make sure it doesn't get dust or get scratched. So it's important to make sure you replace this when you're not using the camera. All right, so heading back to the screen. So if this disappears, you can press this button right here, your shutter, and if you click that once, you'll see the menu pops back up. So the settings are shutter speed. The shutter speed is going to correlate to how long the shutter is open, so how long the picture is being taken for. So this is really helpful when you're trying to freeze action, create blurred motion, do panning. There's all sorts of reasons why you'd want to creatively adjust the shutter speed. So if we look here where it says f5.0, this is your aperture, or f-stop as it's referred to. So aperture is like your pupil. It can have a bigger opening or a smaller opening, and that's going to correspond to how much light is getting in the camera. So to control that on your camera, there's an AV button. There's also a plus minus on there and the trash can, but if you click this, notice how those yellow arrows move right over, and when I release it, it hops back over to shutter. So that's how you toggle back and forth between your shutter and your aperture. And I'll talk about how to change them as well. So let's go back to shutter speed really quickly. So while the yellow arrows are on my shutter speed, there's a little dial right here on the top of the camera. And when I move the dial to the left, my shutter speed is slowing down. So if I keep clicking all the way to the left and get slower and slower, and then all of a sudden there's 1 second, 1.3 seconds, and you can keep going all the way to 4 seconds. So there's instances where you may want to slow your shutter speed down for various reasons. You might want it to be really fast, so I can keep going faster and faster and faster. So depending on if you want to freeze action and how fast it's going, this is your fastest shutter. So all the way to the right, you get really, really fast shutter speeds, and as you move to the left, you're going to slow that down. So let's go ahead and toggle back over to aperture. So aperture, if I move all the way to the left, 4.5 is the lowest number I'm getting right now. Sometimes you might get a little lower than that. It's variable depending on where your other settings are, how much light is getting into the camera. Right now I'm at f4.5. So that is going to be a bigger opening. The smaller the number, the bigger the opening, which is going to let more light in. But if I click over to the right, let's go all the way to the right, I have f29. that's going to be a little small opening, which is going to be a lot less light. This also is going to correspond to how much is in focus. These bigger numbers, usually even all the way from f8 and up, the higher the number, you are going to have a greater depth of field. So that's really good for like landscape photos and capturing things that are further away. And if you move to the left and you're going to get some smaller numbers, but bigger aperture opening, this is really good for shallow depth of fields, capturing a subject up close that is in focus, but then the background is really blurry. So we've talked about how to change these settings, and we'll talk about different variations of when you might want to use them, but the most important thing right now is how to change those settings. And then the last setting is ISO or ISO, and that is a button right here. If you click it, ISO, then you'll see that you have the different speeds here. So there is auto, which some photographers do like to use, but if you want full control or you need to adjust the amount of light that's being let in your camera, you can control it yourself. So 100, 200 typically are for when you're outside, there's more sun, even occasionally next to a really bright window. And then 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, you know, you're shooting maybe indoors or night when there's less light. Keep in mind that at 100 or 200, you're going to get much clearer of a photo, whereas when you move up to these higher numbers, you might get more noise in your photo. So it's just something to be aware of when you are setting your camera and depending on the scenario. So let's take a look at our lens really quick. We have two options. We have autofocus, AF, or manual focus, MF. So for autofocus, the camera focuses for you. So I'm gonna switch it to autofocus a minute. And when I press the shutter button, I'm gonna watch the lens there. You hear a little beep beep and it focuses on, you know, whatever is in front of it. And sometimes it doesn't always get it right. So that is where manual focus comes into play. And with manual focus, you are actually going to use the end of your camera and you adjust it and make sure your subject is in focus. And you also can zoom on your lens, although I recommend trying to move closer to your subject rather than just relying on zoom when you can, just because you're going to get a much clearer photo that way. But do make sure if you are on manual focus, you do the adjusting, but be aware if you are on AF, autofocus, you don't want to adjust this. Your camera is in control. So again, the way you will focus is you will click the top button and your camera will focus for you. And as I move, it refocuses because there's new subjects for it to focus on. And again, if I'm in manual, I do the adjusting. So when I'm looking through my viewfinder, I will be able to adjust this until it's nice and clear and I'll be able to see it. You also have the option, there is a button right here that you can click and then you can see through the screen here instead of through the viewfinder. I've got this little rabbit here. So if I set this little rabbit into view right here, the rabbit in my viewfinder. What I'm gonna do is twist the end of this dial until it's in focus. All right, so you can see that detail there come into focus. Now watch when I make it out of focus there. So we got in focus, out of focus. Now, of course, my camera settings need to be adjusted here. So let's take a look at my camera settings. And you might be wondering, how do you choose your setting? Well, it's variable depending on the type of photo that you want to take. Now, if you're taking some sort of action shot related to movement, often shutter speed is your priority and you want to set that first and then you can adjust the other two to make sure you have enough light. Now, if you're taking something like the rabbit photo and you want a really close-up view of it with a blurry background, or a landscape photo, you might want to prioritize your aperture and adjust the other two accordingly. ISO is a really good variable setting, whereas these two are a more creative setting and is going to help you get a certain type of shot that you want. So you do have a light meter right here. So as you are taking your pictures and adjusting your settings, you will see there is a little flashing icon there showing me that this is too bright. It is going to be overexposed. I want to get in the middle at that 0. That is typically a correct exposure. Over here on this side, it's typically going to be more underexposed, a little too dark. So sometimes it is nice to get pictures a little on either side. Sometimes photographers do that just to get more than one, but your goal is to try to get in the middle there. So here's how we do that. So with this rabbit photo, or with this rabbit, I probably want to pick aperture. I want shallow depth of field. So I want to start with my aperture and scooch over, and actually 4.5 is pretty good because again, I want a shallow depth of field. I could maybe go 5.0, maybe 5.6, but I want to get it as low as I can. Oh, actually went a little lower, so 3.5. That's great. So it is overexposed. So what I can do is speed up shutter. So as I speed up the shutter, you're gonna see that move to the left. So that's as fast as my shutter goes. That's where I want my aperture. It's still a little too bright. So ISO, I can adjust that. Let's see what happens when I make it 1600. It's a little underexposed here. So let's go ahead and go to 3200. And then when I click the shutter, that's how I'm checking it. I'm clicking the shutter and then it's flashing. So that's a little overexposed. So maybe what I want to do is just bump that up to 4. And then that's right where I want it. So now what I can do is set up my rabbit. I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's in focus and take the picture. And looking at it, it's a little too dark. So maybe what I could do, let's make an adjustment. I'm gonna slow down the shutter speed so it's not so fast. And then take another picture. Oh, we're getting somewhere. Let's maybe slow it down just a little bit. It's pretty fast and my subject isn't moving, so I can definitely slow that down. Each time I look through the viewfinder, I do make sure I'm focusing, because sometimes even a slight movement can change your focus. And that looks pretty good. And then let's take a look at where it is on my light meter. So it's showing a little overexposed. Well, granted, I'm looking at a different view than when I tilt my camera. So every time you move your camera, it's going to pick up the light that is right in front of it there. So this is going to continually adjust. So that's why occasionally you might have to move these down or up just a little bit to get the correct exposure. And then to view your picture, you can click this play button, and then you can toggle back and forth with these side buttons here. Now let's say you take one that you're like, clearly that one's not a great picture. You can click the little trash icon, toggle over to erase, click set to erase that. And then what you'll notice is it actually tells you what your settings were for the photo. So when you're looking back through your photos, you can see which settings you like best. So typically I try not to use a flash, a built-in flash like this camera has. However, to turn the flash on, there is a little flash icon. And if you click that, the flash will pop up and then you can just push it down. So sometimes there are some creative reasons or some aesthetic reasons why you might want a flash, but oftentimes it's best to use a flash that mounts on top of your camera and gets a little bit more light in there. But this is what we have on this camera, so I did want to show you how you use it just in case. And if it is up, it will go off. And then when you are finished with your camera, you will turn it off. You will put the lens cap back on. But the battery, it's a good idea to take that out, put that back in the charger so it's ready for the next time you want to use it.